The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. I've been involved in web design and web consulting since the mid-90s, and I felt that a core learning in design was, you are not your user. If you want to be user-centric, you got to think like the user. You got to move beyond yourself and move beyond the needs of the organization. And for many years, I thought it was all out. If there was a universe, it was the universe of the user or of the customer. And that was the ultimate goal and the ultimate objective of digital design or customer centric design or user experience design. And then in recent years, I began to feel, well, maybe there's something bigger than this. Obviously, with the climate crisis really ramping up, and maybe we need to be thinking about not simply making it easy for the user, but making it easy for the earth as well. That often simplicity creates a burden on the earth because it demands more resources, or it creates environments that are very transient and are very wasteful. So the issues of overconsumption and the problems with gross domestic product and with growth have been recognized for quite a long time. This is a cartoon, actually, not from 2021 or 2019, but actually 1969, that recognized we were, using too many resources. And it's estimated right now that we're using about 1.5 or 1.6 Earths from a resource point of view. And the big broader issue is that it's not just about global warming. It's not just about CO2 emissions. There are many other factors that have an impact on the ability for life to thrive on this planet. Material footprints, ecological footprints, blue water, land use changes, etc. So this was in 1992 showing that phosphorus and nitrogen usage were already going beyond the boundaries. And this is where we're at in 2015, the latest data in this specific data set. So in practically every area, we are going significantly beyond the boundaries. It's not simply about the warming climate. It's about the extinction of many species. It's about the way we use materials as well. And I think one of the things that I have found strangest in all this is the invisibility of digital, the argument of immaterialism, the sense that things are in the cloud, and the sense that as other organizations and other sectors are beginning to address climate change and climate warming, that often in the digital space, we practically ignore it, or we design as if there are no boundaries, we should exist within no boundaries. This is the COP26 website. COP26, many people regard as a failure of leadership. But when you analyze this website with the excellent service of websitecarbon.com, it says, oh, this page is dirtier than 94% of pages tested. And every visit emits 5.3 grams of CO2. Now, to get that into some degree of context, best practice would be something like gov.uk, where every visit would emit about 0.18 grams. So this is a massively polluting website, an incredibly badly designed website. It's like a 20-year-old badly maintained diesel truck. That's the damage it is doing on the web. And this is the very website, COP26, that is claiming that it is the essence of how we actually save the world. It is one of the worst design websites from an ecological point of view that you could come about, that you could actually find. The weight of that page is 9 MB. There's absolutely no reason that a page should weigh more than 1 MB. And in fact, you can design brilliant pages for 100 kilobytes. So 9 MB is absolute excess, an extraordinarily bad, careless, climate destroying design. And this is coming from the COP26 website that's claiming to be the model of how humans are going to fix the planet and save the future. And part of this is fed into and feeds into this techno-utopianism that technology is inherently green. This is what I believed for a great many years. I was an avid reader of Wired magazine, and in 1997 they brought out this issue, this arrogance, this rock and roll arrogance, a kind of, in the sense, the way technology, move fast and break things, that rules don't apply to us, and everything we do is good and positive. So we're facing 25 years of prosperity, freedom, and a better environment for the whole world. You got a problem with that. Like, anybody who challenges technology is, a Luddite, and the Luddites actually had a lot going to them for them. You should read up if you don't know about their actual background. So by 2022, how's it working out, tech bros? Not so well. But they say, oh yeah, we're doing this online, and yes, we're giving this speech online, and it's much better than flying or driving and everything like that. Yes. In a like-to-like comparison, in many situations, having a webinar or a conference call is basically better than getting on a plane. But are we saying that we're getting on planes less? Well, here's the growth, of airline travel since 1964, between 1974 and 2014. You see here, just to go back again, the line for basically this line at the bottom, this zero line, that's poor people. Rich people, 90% of people have never taken a flight. And here's another core thing. The drivers of these issues are not population, are not primarily population. They are the rich set. They are basically the top 10%, which is the middle class of Europe and North America, and of course the super rich in the process. So the internet and all this stuff has not reduced consumption in other areas. In many ways, it's a secret accelerant of consumption. We wouldn't have cheap flights. We wouldn't have Ryanair at the scale it is without the web. So often the web accelerates, and it's an additive onto everything else and an accelerant. Half the emission cuts will come from future tech. They're always, it's always around the corner. We're going to solve. This is such a dangerous and damaging type of cult and philosophy. Technology has never in history reduced energy consumption. When you make technology twice as efficient, you get 3 times more energy use in the environment. So they say, oh yeah, but planes are going to become technologically more efficient. So this is millions of tons of emissions from aviation use, which is expected to triple. It's not going to reduce by 50% because of these amazing technological solutions. It's expected to triple. With low efficiency, we see here the low efficiency, even with high efficiency improvement, it's still going to double or more. And we have space tourism. So we know long-haul flights, about 1 ton of CO2 per person for a long-haul flight. For space flights, it's about 60 ton. So where do we have our technological gurus and leaders leading us? They want to send us to Mars or send us to the moon or bring us into flight. This is their thinking. This is how they're going to save the actual planet. I don't think so. And Uber and Lyft, and always the promises, oh, when Uber and Lyft and these sorts of services came along, they said passengers are helping to reduce the carbon footprint. But studies have shown, a Carnegie Mellon study in particular recently, that the reality is where Uber and Lyft come into cities, there's a 20% increase in CO2. There isn't a reduction in CO2, there's an increase in actual CO2. So much of the promise of technology about efficiency, etc., is a lie, and they know it's a lie, but they just want to sell us all this sort of stuff. Computing power growth, the explosion in computing power growth particularly since the 70s, from the mid 60s onwards, computing power growth has exploded. We know Moore's law, every 18 months computer efficiency is doubling. Energy demand, energy demand is exploding. So computer power growth is certainly, it's not reducing by any stretch of the imagination energy demand. It's actually secretly accelerating energy demand because double the efficiency in technology, treble the use. So we see where this is going. We use too much, we consume too much in the process. The EIA projects a nearly 50% increase in world energy usage by 2050. Renewable cars are not going to solve the future if we're constantly increasing energy. Extraction of gigatons. And to get to these renewable technologies will require an explosion in extraction of mining and other sort of actual activities. So raw materials use to double by 2060. An electric vehicle typically requires 4 times the minerals of traditional vehicles, and extraction activities are responsible for 90% of biodiversity loss. And biodiversity loss is a nice way for humans killing everything non-human, whether that be other species or plants or things that actually grow. So the extractive industries, which have got to absolutely explode, in other words, in order to achieve our green economies and our renewable vehicles, will result in the decimation of millions and millions of species. It's getting worse, unfortunately, the story of humans. If we looked at the story of humans and all the CO2 that we have caused since we came on this planet, by 1919, it was about 5%. We had caused about 5% of the total CO2. By 1975, we had caused 25% of the total CO2 that we're directly responsible for. By 1995, that had risen. So in 20 years between 75 and 95, we had caused another 50%. And between 1995 and basically 2020, we had 50%. This is extraordinary acceleration, and this maps directly to the technological revolution, the computer-driven revolution. The web launched in 1989, and since then, computer sector has expanded in a scope, scale, and at speeds like no other industry in history. So technology, if not directly causing climate crisis, is an accelerant of all other technologies and all other sectors, and drives more and more use of things. It's a rich world problem. The poorest 50% cause 10% of CO2 devices. The richest 10% cause 50% of actual pollution. It is humans and their technologies, humans, us and our 4 devices and our 2 cars, and all the other technological things that we actually surround ourselves in the process. It is not the poor people. It is the rich people who are destroying the future of the planet. And we are doing it because we overconsume, we overproduce, and we overconsume, and we create massive waste. Talked about species decline earlier. Marine species, 49% decline since 1970. Insects, 50%. Irish birds, 63%. Wildlife in general, 66%. And freshwater species, an 83% decline. This is driven by extractive mining industry, disturbing habitats. Many of the products that we need to build this new technological future are found in rare places and precious habitats, which will be destroyed in order to actually create them. And the culture to create what? What are we creating? A vintage car. You would think a vintage car is at least the 1970s, if not the 1920s or the 1930s. So what is vintage when we talk about computers? Last year, Apple made an announcement that Apple declares the 12-inch MacBook from 2015 a vintage product. So a 6-year-old product is now vintage. And this is the culture of technology. Create things really quickly and fast with really short life cycles. That's how you're going to maximize the revenue. However, there is change. There is change happening. There's a movement around the world called the right to repair, talking about the fixability, about creating products that last, that can be durable for 10 years or 20 years. And Apple was forced in the last week to allow spare parts to become available to customers of the products. And that was not because Apple wanted to do that. It was because there was a social movement, a social right to repair movement. So there's an awakening among the populations, the societies, that the models that we have created, while being incredibly profitable for big tech, are extraordinarily destructive for the future of life on this planet. Life of a machine in years. A vacuum cleaner should last about 11 years, at least 11 years, to be in any way sustainable from a materials point of view. The actual life of the laptop, of the vacuum cleaner, is 6.5 years. A washing machine in 2011 should last 17 years. It was lasting about 10 years. A washing machine in 2021 was lasting 6.3 years. Why is there a massive decline? Because of technology, because of complexity, because of circuitry, because these machines have become more complex, and the more complex become, the less durable that they become in the process. It's estimated that a laptop should last 20 years. Our typical laptops are only lasting 4.5 years. We are cycling through materials at an extraordinary and utterly unsustainable rate. We cannot sustain the extractive industries for another 50 or 60 years. This planet, certainly life on this planet, cannot survive if we keep going at the pace that we're going. How much CO2 does it cost to manufacture a laptop? It creates about 300 kgs of CO2 to manufacture. So in a typical, certainly consumer environment, 80% of the pollution occurs during the manufacturing cycle, and only about 20% of the pollution occurs during the use cycle of the actual process. Global PC sales over the last 15 years or so. They declined a bit with the emergence of smartphones, but we're still talking about 240 million PCs being sold every year. That's 4.2 billion since between 2006 and 2019. At 300 kg, that's 1.3 billion tons of CO2 just to manufacture those PCs. And that's just the CO2. It's not all the other pollution of the rivers and the waters and the slags and the material that has actually been used. A typical smartphone is about 60 kg of CO2 to manufacture. Using a smartphone for a year causes somewhere between 3 and 5 kg. So you get the essential relationship that a huge amount of the waste, a huge amount of the damage occurs during the manufacturing process. So there's rules we can take from that. Global smartphone sales, 122 million in 2007, right? Up to about selling about 1.5, billion smartphones a year by 2021. That's 15 billion smartphones, twice the human population, basically, since 2007. 60 kgs, that's 900 million tons of CO2. the footprint. The key rules here is hold on to our devices, fix them. I used to change my phone every 2 years, essentially change my laptop every 2 years. If you keep a smartphone for 1 year, this is a study said about 72 kgs of CO2 responsible per year. But if you keep it for 10 years, it's 7. So look at a model here. Keep your phone for 3 years. Over a 60-year working life, that's 20 devices that you're going to own. If you keep your devices on average for 4 years, that's 15 devices you're going to own. If you keep your devices for 5 years, that's 12 devices, a different than 8 devices. Think of all those billions of smartphones that are being made, most of them ending up in dumps. Much less than 20% of electronics are properly recycled. And in fact, a huge quantity of Western global North electronics are shipped to poor countries like Ghana, Afghanistan, or India, where they are recycled in the informal, what's called the informal economy. 57 million tons of e-waste in 2021. That's enough e-waste to build the Great Wall of China. And it's doubling basically every 15 years. So by 2050, we'll be able to build 2 Great Walls of China a year just from e-waste. The vast majority of electronics not properly recycled. It's estimated there's about 18 million children and 13 million women involved in the informal economy of e-waste around the world. And this is what the recycling is. They burn the cables in order to get to the copper, the materials. These cables are tremendously toxic and damaging. So these children, their health, the health of the women, the health of the young boys that are doing this as well, damaged. A smartphone can have up to 1,000 materials, many of these highly toxic, that will leach into the water, into various different ecosystems. So e-waste is a massive and growing problem that has not been in any way seriously addressed. And what drives a lot of these devices, so what's the hidden reason why we're churning through so many devices, is the data. The data that we're producing, whether it's images or videos or whatever, and we say, oh yeah, but it's only a tiny bit of data and it doesn't really have that big of an impact. We're now into zettabytes of data. I calculated that to print out 1 zettabyte of data would require the paper from 20 trillion trees. Just 1 zettabyte of data, 20 trillion trees. Now, there are only about 3.5 trillion trees on the planet at the moment. So that's an impossibility, 1 zettabyte of data. It's estimated by 2035 there will be over 2,000 zettabytes of actual data, a 28% annual growth rate. This is utterly unsustainable, and 90% of the data is crap. 90% of data is not used 3 months after it's stored. So I'm going to be talking about taking action later, but there's 2 broad areas of action. One is hold on to our devices as long as possible, and the other is delete as much data as you possibly can, and don't even create the data in the first place. If we can stop the data, we can stop the machine growth and the device growth, and we can have machines for much longer. So hold on to our machines, hold on to our devices, get them repaired, and make sure they are properly and professionally recycled when we do recycle them, and delete the crap. 90% of what we create is crap, and we should delete it. Most data centers are data dumps. Look at the number of websites. One website back in 1991. Look at how they've exploded since the turn of the century. Now it's estimated something like 1.7, 1.8 billion websites. How on earth do you need 1.7 billion websites. 91% of content gets no traffic from Google. So we're creating huge quantities of content that we create, never even see the light of day. I remember once working, for years I worked with Microsoft, and it was estimated at one stage that there was 15 million pages on Microsoft.com, and that 4 million pages, 4 million of those 15 million pages had never been looked at, had never been accessed. So essentially, the equivalent of the population of Ireland of pages that nobody has ever looked at. Why do we create all this crap? Why, as a manager, stop the crap before it even gets created? I want to give you an idea around content pollution and how content actually pollutes. So I did an analysis with lots of other experts in the content space. We estimated to create a typical 1,000 words of content takes about 20 hours of effort, from ideation to actual creation to review to sending a sign off and editing and all those sorts of things. About 20 hours. So I estimated on a laptop, and I estimated then the impact, and I can go into these numbers at a later stage, the impact of using a laptop for an hour, which I calculated at 107 grams of CO2 was the impact. That this document was 5 megabytes in size, that I just imagined for this scenario that was read once, and that the reading time was 4 minutes. So in this environment, where's the pollution? 98% of the pollution is in the creation process, because that's where the 20 hours are used using the laptop. Only a fraction is in distributed, about 7 grams to read it, 7 grams of CO2, and storing it absolutely minimal as well. But basically, that 1,000 words of content was responsible for 2 kgs of CO2. If we could start thinking that way as content or design professionals about this is going to cause this amount of pollution. Now, if this was read 10,000 times, then the total would be about 80 kgs of CO2. Now, that could be a good thing that it's read 10,000 times. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but if it was read 10,000 times, then 98% of the pollution would be in the use, because it would be on the devices of the people who would be reading it and the impacts on those actual devices. So thinking about pollution is thinking about weight, reducing digital weight. If we can reduce digital weight, whether it's the size of our web pages or the size of our documents, 500 words is more environmentally friendly than 1,000 words. I did an experiment where I saved an amount of content in HTML. It came out at 39 kilobyte. I saved the exact same amount as a PDF. It came out as 141 kilobyte. I'm going to talk about these issues a little later, about the right formats and the weights, the relative weights of the different actual formats. Photos are exploding on the web, and most photos and images are horrible, fake, cliche type of images. So this is the growth of photography and the amount of photographs being taken over the last 120 years. It was estimated in 1900 about 1 million photos per year were actually being taken. And we see it's very low until we reach the 90s. Then by 2000, it's really beginning to take off. By 2010, growing very substantially. And by 2000, the decade between 2010 2020 absolutely exploded. 13 trillion photos taken since 1900, 1.4 trillion taken in 2020. More photos were taken in 2020 than in the entire 20th century. Think about that. More photos taken in 2020 than in the entire 20th century, and the vast majority of them are crap and they'll never be looked at again. So I did some calculations about the number of trees you'd need to plant to deal with the CO2 pollution of photos taken from 2000 to 2020. 675 million trees would need to be planted. 80 for the taking, and that was assuming 15 seconds to take each photo, 50 million for transferring them to the cloud, 40 million to view them, half of them once, but storing them, because storage builds over time, 2,000. And then you've got 2000, 2001, you've got 2000's photo plus 2001. So estimated 515 million trees, 675 million trees for a bad habit of taking too many photos. We don't need to take 1.4 trillion photos. Videos are estimated about 80% of web traffic. This is a video from ECDC, part of the European Union's medical centre. Why do you need this video? This 30-second video comes in at 1.7 megabytes. Why do we need it? I mean, 1.7 megabyte is extremely small for a video because of the way it's designed, but it's still 1.7 megabyte. Do we need to do a video there? This is the text, right? The text is 2 kilobytes. So the video is 850 times more polluting than the text. The text is 2 kilobytes. The video is 1.7 megabytes. Did we need a video for that? Did we need a video to communicate that information? Is it not just better communicated as a bunch of text? I was doing research on printing carbon footprint because I wanted the idea of how much carbon footprint to send a physical letter to print an A4 page. And I came across this page. It's a PDF, 650 kilobytes, right? So I calculated the actual text I needed explaining how the calculator worked was 10 kilobytes. So this was the rest, 640 kilobytes for this stupid image. I mean, what an extraordinary waste. There is so much waste out there in imagery and content in videos, stuff that has absolutely no benefit. How on earth does two geeks laughing at each other help you understand the printing carbon footprint calculator key assumptions? How on earth does this in any way contribute to anything useful in the planet, on the earth? This is destructive. We are so destructive because we are focused on superficial and artificial and designed to create a type of wow factor. Oh, the cliches of the two smiling faces. Can we please get away from this horrible surface superficial design, because it's driving most people mad and it is destroying the planet as well. So here's a model of understanding the weight of things, because we need to understand the weight of things in digital. We feel that it's in the cloud, that it's immaterial, that it's weightless, but it has a weight. And the less the weight, the better. Because when we're talking about zettabytes of data, etc., that weight, it begins to have a huge burden in the environment. 1,000 words of text. You know the cliche about how 1,000 words, an image paints 1,000 words. Well, sometimes it does, but in a great many situations, it doesn't remotely. Did that image of those two geeks looking at a laptop, did that paint 1,000 words about the printing calculator? You know, about the CO2 of a printing calculator? You know, not at all. 1,000 words of text can be extraordinarily powerful and vastly more useful than an image or a video in a huge range of circumstances. So I'm asking you, don't get carried away because it's bigger, because it moves, it's better. Sometimes the simplest text is the most environmentally friendly way of communication. We should always default to the most environmentally friendly means of communication, if at all possible. 1,000 words of text in a text file is about 6 kilobytes. If you do a really well optimized, highly optimized HTML file, that will be just 7 kilobytes, just a kilobyte of formatting for HTML there. HTML is a wonderful, environmentally friendly way to communicate if done properly. If you simply save that 1,000 words of text as a Word document, it's about 16 kilobytes. If you do poorly optimized HTML, it can be about 51 megabytes. So what I did was I saved the Word document as a HTML file, and it was 51 kilobytes. A PDF can be in the region of 60, 70 kilobytes. So you're seeing your options. Sometimes a PDF will be the right option. But if we can go to the least intensive, the least weight option, we should always go to the least weight option. Right? So a PDF can be 9 times more CO2 than optimized HTML. 1,000 word of text equals to images in kilobytes. A highly optimized. So what I did was 1,000 words of text is roughly 2 A4 pages. So I saved images, typical images, the equivalent area of 2 A4 pages, and then I went through various optimization processes. If you do WebP, which is the most optimized way to present images on the web, then that equivalent space of imagery was 178 kilobytes. At 150 dpi JPEG, it was 404. At 300 dpi WebP, it was 392, and 300 dpi JPEG 992. So there can be a huge difference between how you optimize your actual images. So potentially an image 212 times more CO2 than text. So that gives you a sense of let's make sure that image is working. I'm not saying no images by any sense, but really you need to think carefully about your images and really use them when they're truly powerful and they're truly useful in the process. So to read 1,000 words of text takes about 4 minutes to actually read. So an MP3 128 kilobytes per second is about 4. Now we're into megabytes. 256 kbps, about 8 megabytes. And if you saved it as a WAV, which you never should, only if you're doing studio work with music, it jumps to 66 megabytes. So potentially audio 11,000 times more intense with CO2 than text. A 4-minute video, 24 frames per second MP4, about 55 megabyte. YouTube standard, about 70. YouTube more high definition, about 110. At 4K video, 932, not kilobytes, megabytes. At 8K, about 2.4 gigabytes in the process. So 8K video can be 400,000 times more polluting than text. So we see the scale of our choices. So again, not saying don't use video, but really think about the video. And every second counts. Every second you can edit out of that video saves a huge amount of weight in the process. So when you're doing those videos, make them as short as is absolutely possible. Okay, just looking at other scales. Letters. So people say, yeah, but it's much better than flying and it's much better than sending physical letters. So there was a study done on sending a physical letter, and it said that it took about 29 grams between the paper and the transportation, etc. Sending an image, a HTML email with an image can, with a very simple image, can cause about 8 grams of CO2. Just a HTML email formatted with no imaging, but just formatted in HTML can be up to 6 grams of CO2. But if it's only a text email, it's 2 grams. So if you're using Outlook or stuff like that, default to text. A text email causes 3 times less pollution than its equivalent HTML email. Spam is about 0.3 of a gram because most spam is caught server side, so it doesn't get to transfer across the network. But attachments can be up to 50 grams in the process. So sending big attachments are immediately worse than sending a physical letter. 405 billion letters posted every year, but there's 390 billion emails sent every day. 390 billion emails sent every single day. So I did some calculations. 32 billion trees would have to be planted every year to offset the pollution caused by unopened attachments, unread email, and spam. I'm not talking about the legitimate stuff. I'm talking about the waste. I'm talking about the horribly damaging stuff. 32 billion trees we need to plant every year. Web page size, look at it, up to 4 megabytes. That COP26 website, 9 megabytes just for that page. We don't need this. Growth is wholly unnecessary. It's through poor design, lazy design in the process. Second, to download mobile pages for average people, going up to 27 seconds. JavaScript exploding, 600% growth. A great many pages don't even need JavaScript. Custom fonts, a lot of the time you can't even see the difference between standard fonts and custom fonts. 850% growth in the process. So taking action. I'm going to leave you with some very specific things to do. Right. Buy a laptop, not a desktop. If you're getting something that desktops are twice as polluting as laptops. The lowest possible spec that you can buy. Best energy ratings. Keep it as long as possible. Don't use large screens. Don't add a large screen onto it. Reduce monitor brightness. Do not use screensavers. Screensavers are highly energy consumptive. Monitor off after 5 minutes max. Sleep after 10 minutes max. Shut down when not using. Shut down at night. It's estimated in some countries 20% of electricity use is what's called vampire power, devices which are not being used but are always left on. And switch off everything you can at night and hold on to. And actually this presentation will be made available, and it will be recorded as well if you want to get this stuff later as well. If you're using a smartphone, minimize notifications. They're energy intensive. Disable location services. They're energy intensive. Remove unused apps. Energy intensive to update those apps. Think hard before downloading apps. This reduces wear and tear on your battery and other things, and makes your phone last longer. Watch out for greedy apps. There's certain apps, Facebook, etc., that are extremely intensive and constantly calling back. Keep battery level between 50 and 80%. That's the optimal space for the longest lasting battery. Short charges are better. Don't leave it plugged in at full charge, and don't drain your battery completely. Use a wire to charge. A wire requires 50% less energy than a wireless device to charge. Remove when plugged in and plug out the charger if at all possible. Dim the screen, use dark mode if possible, stream in standard definition if you are doing video, and don't expose your phone to a lot of heat. These are just tips that will help your phone to last longer and that you'll be able to hold on to it for longer. Online meetings. I haven't used video in this because audio is 90% on a typical scenario, creates 90% less pollution than does video. So here's some tips with running online meetings. Video to greet, then to go to audio. So video on for the first 3 or 4 minutes you're in a meeting, and then go to audio with your group. You can reduce pollution by 90% for that specific meeting. Use the lowest res possible, smallest screen possible. Avoid virtual backgrounds. Virtual backgrounds are significantly more energy intensive, so try and avoid using virtual backgrounds. Consider the platform. Zoom is 2 to 3 times more efficient than Microsoft Teams. Don't save the meeting. If you do have to save it, delete it after 3 months, and text or phone, or hopefully after COVID, we can physically meet people in the process. If you can do it by email, do it by email. If you can do it by a lighter device, a lighter way, reduce the weight. So reduce weight, delete your details from the web, delete emails more than 2 years old, delete all data more than 2 years old, delete unused accounts, delete unused software apps, delete subscriptions, delete files in the download folder, and take out the trash. Empty the trash. Get rid of the trash, the digital data trash. And also, I'll leave you with a concept of thinking in trees. How do we create more empathy? Because digital is invisible. So this is a concept I'm working on. The average tree absorbs about 10 kg of CO2 per year. One tree, let's imagine, is equal to 10,000 leaves. One leaf is therefore equal to 6 grams of CO2. So if you were sending a HTML email, and this is without any image in that HTML, imagine 6 leaves having to go to work to deal with that HTML email. If you only send a text email, only 2 leaves have to go to work to deal with that text email. And if you saw no email at all, the leaves don't have to go to work to sequester that CO2 carbon. So again, yes, move beyond our own thinking. We needed to move beyond the organizational thinking. And out here we taught the user-centric, but making it easy for people can often make it hard for the planet. We need to go out to the next level of earth-centered design and constantly being cognizant of the impact, the weight we have on the earth, on the resources, on all those other areas. And if you're interested in diving deeper into these sorts of issues, I'm doing a 3-hour session in January to further develop these principles and explain these principles. Earth Experience Design, you'll get the information at thisisdoing.com, but also if you get in touch with me or come to my own website, you will as well. So thank you very much for listening to this. And please, if you can, if you think this is important, please tell others about it. Please spread the word. So few people really understand the issues connected with this. They think it's in the cloud or it's immaterial. So please become evangelists, spread the word. You'll be getting information. I'm running another one of these in December. Please get your colleagues or friends to maybe attend if they can, if possible. But thank you for listening. And basically, if there are any questions, we have definitely time for questions. So please feel free to ask any questions, and very much appreciating you taking the time to actually attend this. So Wojciech here is saying, thanks, Gerry. This is really informative and well put together, almost like an instant reminder of everything that's wrong. Thank you. Yeah, I know it's horrible in this pandemic to be, the bringer of bad news, but hopefully it's not about, too much depression, but more about actions that we can actually take. We can turn this around, but I think particularly if there are people on the call who are digital professionals, or, we have so ignored this problem of the impact of digital and how it accelerates so many bad behaviors. I think it's important we try and make the change. So Sylvia says, thank you so much. We're getting a good few questions here, so that question just disappeared on me. Thank you so much. It is so much information. I would like to see it again. I certainly will tell everybody I know. That's great. Hopefully within the next 24 hours there'll be you'll get information on the recording of it. Danielle is saying, just big thank you, really impactful, and we'll definitely be sharing with others. That's great, Danielle, absolutely fantastic to hear. Richard here, Gerry, thank you so much for another powerful, informative webinar. Thank you, Richard, and you're doing great work as well with low carbon design. Kate is saying, is there a trade-off between choosing the lowest spec devices versus trying to get the maximum lifespan out of it? I think that's an interesting thing. I think lowest spec is not always lowest quality. So you always go for high quality stuff, but maybe you don't need the highest spec in the high quality. But it's a good point about, it's not about going cheap, but it's about I used to always buy the highest spec because I thought, hey, why shouldn't I? I've got money and stuff like that. And the vast majority of the time, I didn't use I didn't need to use it. So a great point. Lowest spec does not mean lowest quality. Always go for quality, but ask when you're buying, is this repairable? Is this changeable? Can I swap this out? There's a good new computer company called Framework Computers, where it's modular design and you can swap things in and out of the actual process. So, asking those sorts of questions. How long is the warranty? Is it repairable? Is it modular? David is saying, when we are causing CO2, have you a view about the best offsetting mechanisms? I think, David, offsetting isn't bad, but it's a kind of like confession, or, going to confession, and then you can sin for the next week because you went to your confession. Or offsetting is a real short-term solution. I think we have to find ways to reduce consumption, reduce production, rather than use offsetting. I think offsetting can be a very damaging cop-out type of approach, and I've used it myself in many situations, but I don't have examples of offsetting organizations. But I'd say the problem is much, much deeper, and we need to reduce consumption and reduce production. So as a manager, I say to you, ask your staff, why do we need to write this? Why do we need to produce this? Do we need 20 images? I've worked with entities like IKEA, where, you know, with less images, they sold more, you know, product, or, you know, they did more actual success. More content does not actually always mean, you know, more benefit in the environment. Bernice says, thank you very much. I'm a designer running my own business. You've given me so much thought. I will be doing along on the 19th. Oh, that's great, Bernice. And hopefully we can have lots of discussions on them, and help further develop these principles. And absolutely, please spread the word. Alex saying, please don't overload text over graphics. They're very hard to read. Exactly, you know, just text over text, you know, in the process. Good. But we feel, oh, the text needs to be prettied up. No, the text needs to be cleaned up, and work on the text so that it's really precise and meaningful. Text is the most powerful thing next to verbal language that humans have ever created. Thank you, helpful, says Kate. So here we got, you mentioned the virtual backgrounds on video calls were high consumption. Do you know where blurred backgrounds are still? Yeah, blurred or background. Now, I read an article on this, Kate, and I think it included blurred, and because the way that the processor deals with the actual data, because oftentimes we're not moving that all that much. But there was a logic to it, and you can check it up. But definitely blurred and backgrounds were not fantastic. But maybe blurred has less impact than the backgrounds. So David here, thank you for this interesting lecture. Is there any information on comparing the effect and lack of travel during lockdown caused on global CO2 levels, while also looking at the increased use of digital tech? See, there are some interesting studies, David. Obviously, flights have declined, but they expect them to get back up to 19 levels very time soon. And I saw some studies that were published in an excellent online resource called The Conversation, which is academic journals written for ordinary people in ordinary language, that saw a couple of studies where actually people who were working from home were driving just as much as they were driving when they were driving into work. They were just driving to different things, to nature reserves, or picking up the kids, or going to the supermarket, or driving down to the cafe. So the actual working from home didn't actually result in less driving in the process. And this is what's sometimes called the Jevons paradox, where new technologies result in increased usages, or they don't result in reduced usages. So we use the car just as much, we just use it for different purposes. So we're packing things on top of again. So we need to be very careful that we see that actually working from home did actually reduce mileage, because if we're driving the car for other reasons, then we've got the CO2 of those virtual meetings and the same CO2 of driving the actual car. So things are worse, not better, because of working from home. So I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much for attending this. There will be one in December 15th. Please spread the word, and hopefully, I very much hope this has been useful. Thank you very much. Goodbye.